About heredity and environment today. I think in this class we can cover only the heredity part. It's here in development, during the course of development, the influence of heredity and environment, both are very crucial. We cannot ignore environment, we cannot ignore heredity. Both are equally responsible in developing certain behavioral traits, our personality, our intelligence, everywhere, both heredity and environment are important. The conclusions that nature is crucially important and that nurture is crucially important are central to today's psychology. Both nature means the heredity and nurture means the environment. So in today's psychology, within the field of psychology, the importance of both heredity and environment, nature and nurture are equally important. Now, behavioral geneticists explore individual differences using twin and temperament studies. Their research indicates that both nature and nurture influence our life courses. We are products of interactions between our genetic predispositions and our surrounding environment. We are the product of our genetic makeup. We got certain qualities, certain potentialities we have received from our parents. But this is not enough. We need the influence of the environment. In the environment, in the kind of environment where we are brought up, kind of environment we are exposed to, it is very important in developing ourselves. So both heredity and environment, whatever we are getting from our parents is not sufficient unless we get a conducive environment to develop ourselves. Suppose regarding intelligence, genetically we have received some amount of intelligence from our parents, but we have to get that environment. We have to get certain facilities, educational facilities, nutrition, home environment, exposure to a good educational system. We have to get everything, all different kinds of environment. Then only we can reach our potential. Whatever we have received from our parents, that can be unfolded. Otherwise, it will remain as it is. To unfold the potentialities we receive from our parents, we need a conducive environment. বুজি পাইছা নাই? আমি মা দেউতাৰ পৰা যিখিনি পাওঁ সেইখিনিক আমি ভালকে উলাই পৰিবৰ কাৰণে, বিকশিত হ'বৰ কাৰণে তাত আমি এটা ভাল এনভাইৰনমেন্টত ডাঙৰ হ'ব লাগিব. Both heredity and environment, both are equally important. Although genetic influences are pervasive, so are environmental influences. Nurture begins in the womb as embryos receive differing nutrition and varying level of exposure to toxic agents. Sculpted by experience, neural connections multiply rapidly after birth. So genetic influences are powerful. It is always there, genetic influences. So are environmental influences. Even during the period, prenatal period, whenever we are within the mother's womb, we are getting a different kind of environment. That environment is also different. Nurture begins, that environment begins in the womb as embryos receive differing nutrition. Whatever nutrition mother takes, the baby, the fetus in the womb, he is getting that environment. Nutrition begins in the womb as embryos receive differing nutrition and varying level of exposure to toxic agents. Suppose a pregnant lady, she is smoking, she is drinking. These are some, she is consuming certain drugs due to some disease, some problem. So these are toxic agents. And that embryo or the fetus, he is exposed to such environment even when he is within the mother's womb. Clear? That is the environment. he is getting some toxic environment. Whenever the mother is having some intoxicated certain intoxicated things, and then some toxic agents like some drugs. So if she is consuming those things, the baby is getting that toxic environment within the mother's womb. Sculpted by experience, neural connections multiply rapidly after birth. Now this neural connection, our brain, inside our brain there are neural connections. There are many nerve fibers within the brain. Do you know? Brain has got different nerve fibers. And at birth, these are well developed, but the connections are not complete. The whole wiring system is there in the brain, but in the wiring system, the connections are not proper at birth. And to have the proper connections, the baby has to be exposed to different stimulating environment. Whenever he is, suppose he is listening to a loud sound. So visually he is just looking at certain things, some bright light. So these are stimulations for him. And whenever he is getting those stimulations, the nerve endings, nerve fibers within the brain, they are immediately connected. And these connections are very important. Although at birth, during birth the brain is quite developed, 75% of brain growth is complete within 3 years of life. 75% of brain growth is complete during 3 years of life. So during this period, when he is an infant, to have the proper connections in the wiring system of the brain, he should be stimulated. He should be exposed to different kinds of environment. So this is sculpted by experience. He will have different kind of experience. Neural connections multiply rapidly after birth. So neural connections, there are different wiring system connected with this, that. So different neural connections will be there once he is exposed to different kinds of stimulation. Peers powerfully socialize children and are important in learning cooperation, for finding the road to popularity, and for inventing styles of interaction among people of the same age. Cultural groups evolve norms or rules that govern members' behavior. They vary in their requirement for personal space, their expressiveness, their pace of life, and their child rearing practices. So these are the environmental influence. Peers powerfully socialize children and are important in learning cooperation. From the peer interaction, from peer group interaction, they learn the skills, cooperation, for finding the road to popularity. They become popular with the experience, with the association with their peers. So that way, from the cultural groups, and from the cultural groups, they evolve norms and rules that govern members' behavior. From the cultural groups only, they learn different rules and regulations to be in the society. So this is about the environment. Now let's come to heredity. Heredity is the potential each person receives from his or her parents through the transmission of genes. You might be knowing this. Everybody knows this. Heredity is the potential each person receives from his or her parents through the transmission of genes. This also you might be knowing. Humans have 23 pairs of chromosomes. Everybody knows it. Chromosomes are long twisted strands of DNA. DNA is the chemical basis of heredity and carriers of instructions. Genes are the basic unit of heredity. And this is also, you know, I think, the mechanism of conception. The male and female reproductive organs produce germ cells. In the male, their testes produce the male germ cells, the spermatozoa, while in the female, their ovaries produce the female germ cells, the ova. In a normal case, out of so many spermatozoa, only one sperm is able to establish contact with the ovum situated in the ovarian duct of the mother and makes it fertile. The fertilized ovum is technically known as zygote. You know, the fertilized ovum is technically known as zygote, the starting single cell structure of a new life. So this is the zygote, is the starting single cell life of a new life. Thus, human life starts from a single cell produced by the union of two germ cells, one from each parent. Then chromosomes and genes. The hereditary units we receive from our parents and transmit to our offspring are carried by microscopic particles known as chromosomes. Found in the nucleus of each body cells, each chromosome is composed of many individual hereditary units called genes, which also occur in pairs. In human zygote, there are 23 pairs of chromosomes, 23 pairs and 46 numbers. A human being receives 23 chromosomes from each parent. And out of this 23, this 22 pairs, first 22 pairs are called autosomes. All 23 pairs, they are called autosomes, not 22nd pairs, not 22nd, 23 pairs. Clear? And then 23rd pair is the sex chromosome. It is for female, it is XX genes, the building blocks of heredity and development. Genes are parts of DNA molecules which are found in chromosomes in the nuclear cells. Chromosomes are thread-like structure made largely of DNA molecules, a spiraling complex molecule containing genes. These genes contain two chemical substances named DNA and RNA, which are said to be responsible for carrying out the genetic code message from parent to offspring. Because the number of genes is so high, it is extremely unlikely that two human beings would have the same heredity. Because the number of genes is so high that each and every individual is different. And then with the one exception is identical twins who having developed from the same ovum have the same chromosomes and genes. Identical twins and the other twin, fraternal twins. You know about that? This 23rd pair, X chromosome, XX in females and XY in males. And how identical twins develop? During fertilization process, what happens? One ovum is fertilized by one sperm, and then what happens? It is splitted. It splits, isn't it? And then again it reunites. But in certain cases, what happens? It doesn't unite. That is why the identical twin develops. In the process of fertilization of the ovum by the sperm, the ovum is made to split into two parts. In a normal process, these parts are again united. Sometimes, however, it so happens that these two parts fail to unite. Sometimes these two parts fail to unite. The result is that each part is developed into a complete individual in the form of the pair of identical twins. They are found to possess almost the same somatic structure. Somatic means the bodily structures. They are found to possess almost the same somatic structure and characteristics and are definitely of the same sex. So identical twins, they are from the same sex. Then fraternal twins. Normally in each menstrual cycle, the female ovaries produce a single ovum that can be fertilized by a sperm cell. In exceptional cases, what happens? Two ova may be produced simultaneously and be fertilized at the same time by two different sperms. Two ova are released at the same time and they are fertilized by two separate sperms. It may then result in the conception of two individuals who may be grown simultaneously in the womb of the mother. These individuals are known as fraternal twins. Do you know about this? Dominance and recessiveness? Everybody knows it, but still you have to remember it again. Like chromosomes, genes also occur in pairs. Each of the pairs is donated by one of the parents, and offspring thus may be found to derive a gene pair in one of the following forms. So, the gene pair is, it may be a dominant gene from one of the parent and a recessive from the other. So, three things: one dominant gene from one of the parent and recessive from the other, and second, dominant genes from both the parents, and third, recessive genes from both the parents. So, in three different combinations they may get the genes, a dominant from one parent, recessive from one, 2 dominant genes from both the parents and 2 recessive genes from both the parents. Genotype, you know the meaning of genotype? Underlying genetic makeup, and phenotype is traits that are expressed, phenotype. And dominant genes will always be expressed if present. If the dominant gene is there, that characteristic is expressed. And recessive genes will not be expressed unless they are in pair. If there are only 2 recessive genes, then only the trait can be expressed. Otherwise, if one recessive, it cannot be shown. If both members of a gene pair are dominant, the individual will manifest a trait determined by the dominant gene. If both members of a gene pair are dominant, the individual will manifest a trait determined by the dominant gene. If both are dominant. If one is dominant and the other is recessive, then it will show the characteristic of the dominant gene. And but will also carry that if one is dominant and the other is recessive, the individual will show the form of the trait expressive of the dominant gene. He will show the trait of the dominant gene, but will also carry the recessive gene. He may carry the recessive gene, which may be expressed in a different ways as the trait in offspring. So he may carry the recessive gene, but the trait of the dominant gene will be shown. A recessive form of the trait will be expressed if only both the genes are recessive. Thus, the genes determining eye color act in a pattern of dominant and recessive. Eye color, blue eyes are recessive. Blue eyes are carried by recessive genes, and brown eyes are dominant gene. Thus, for a child to be blue-eyed, if a child has to be blue-eyed, both the parents must be blue-eyed. Either both the parents, if a child has to be blue-eyed, either both the parents must be blue-eyed. Then he will get both the recessive. If one parent is brown-eyed, that parent must carry a recessive gene for blue eyes. Both parents may be blue-eyed, but if one parent is brown-eyed, but he has to carry the recessive gene of blue eyes. 2 brown-eyed parents can have a blue-eyed child. If both the parents are brown-eyed, but the child may be blue-eyed, they have to carry the recessive gene of the blue-eyed. 2 brown-eyed parents can have a blue-eyed child if both carry a gene for blue eyes, then both recessive gene will come. So thus for a child to be blue-eyed, both the parents can be blue-eyed, then both recessive genes will be there and he will get the recessive trait. If one parent is brown-eyed, that parent must carry a recessive gene for. One parent may be brown-eyed, other may be blue-eyed, but the brown parent has to carry the recessive gene of the blue eyes. 2 brown-eyed parents can have a blue-eyed child. If both the parents are brown-eyed, they also can have a blue-eyed child, but they have to carry the recessive gene of blue eyes. Clear? So there are many dominant and recessive characteristics. Only this action, right-handedness is the dominant, left-handedness recessive, curly hair dominant, straight hair recessive, dimples without dimples, cleft chin, smooth chin. There are numerous characters are there. Now another thing, sex-linked traits. There are some diseases. One is dominant and recessiveness of genes, then sex-linked traits. This is shown in one sex more. Usually recessive, sex-linked traits are usually recessive and carried on the X chromosome. They are mainly recessive and carried on the X chromosome, appear more frequently in one sex than the another. Some traits, sex-linked traits appear more in one sex than the other. Then these are the examples: colorblindness, blindness, hemophilia, fragile X. These are some examples of sex-linked traits. Sex-linked traits are genetic characteristics determined by genes which are located in sex chromosomes. So these genes are located in sex chromosomes. That means in 23rd pair. X chromosomes may carry either dominant and recessive genes. Y chromosomes carries a few genes dominant for sexual characteristics, but is not known to carry recessive genes. Now in between, I just want to tell you, why we are in psychology, why we are studying this heredity and environment, you might be thinking. So we are going to human development, we are going to study different kinds of human behavior. Why this particular behavior is seen in this particular child, whether this is heredity or it is environmental, where the heredity's role is more, environmental role is less. So that way we have to study the human behavior under human development, and this is the base. First we have to know what are the things, what are the problems which are heredity and where the role of environment is more, where in which characteristics role of heredity is more. So we have to decide later on like this. So these are the basic information we have to know. Y chromosomes carries a few genes dominant for sexual characteristics but is not known to carry recessive genes. Thus, recessive characteristics in the male like color blindness occurs only when the male inherits a recessive colorblind gene from his mother. Females are less often colorblind because to be so they would have to have both a colorblind father and a mother who was colorblind or carrying recessive genes for colorblind. A number of genetically determined disorders are linked to abnormalities of or recessive genes carried by the 23rd pair of chromosomes, and these disorders are called sex links. So whenever these are carried by the traits which are carried by the genes from 23rd chromosome, they are called sex linked traits. If a gene is found only on the sex chromosomes, X chromosome and not the Y chromosome, it is said to be a sex-linked trait. These are found on the X chromosome because the gene controlling the trait is located on the sex chromosome. Sex linkage is linked to the gender of the individual. Usually such genes are found on the X chromosome. The Y chromosome is thus missing such genes. The result is that females will have two copies of the, it is carried by the X chromosome. So females have the, females will have two copies of the sex-linked gene while males will only have one copy of the gene. Male is having only one X chromosome, female is having two X chromosomes. If the gene is recessive, then males only need one such recessive genes to have a sex-linked trait rather than the customary two recessive genes. So this is important point. If the gene is recessive, that sex-linked characteristics is recessive, the male is having only one X chromosome. So if he gets, if he has the gene in that X chromosome, you will show it. It does not require two recessive genes because Y is already dominant. So male only need only one such recessive gene to have a sex-linked trait rather than the customary two recessive genes for traits that are not sex-linked. This is why males exhibit more traits more frequently than females. So there are some sex-linked traits which are shown more frequently in males, not in females, because they are carried by X chromosome. If it is the recessive trait that is carried by in a male, there is X and Y. Y is always dominant. Only if the male carries the trait in the X chromosome, it will be shown. But female, she needs two. So here it is easily shown in males. The first 22 pair of chromosomes determine the development of most of our body structures and characteristics. The remaining 23rd pair consists of the sex chromosomes. These sex chromosomes decide the individual's sex and other sex-linked characteristics. There are two different types of sex chromosomes, X and Y. All eggs have X chromosomes, but sperm cells may contain either X or Y. Therefore, the mother's role in the determination of sex is quite neutral. In determination of sex, mother's role is quite neutral. If a X type of sperm is the first to enter an egg, X as a result will be a female. If the X type of sperm is first to enter the ovum, then the result will be a female. If the Y type of sperm, the 23rd chromosomes will be fertilized by will be XY, the result will be male. Now there are some chromosomal abnormalities. This is the 23 pairs, and then 46 chromosomes. Chromosomes are like this, 22 autosomes. These are a normal setup. But there are some chromosomal abnormalities. Sometimes part of chromosomes may be lost during cell division. During cell division, but these are very rare things. A female may be born with only one X chromosomes instead of XX. Always females have XX chromosome. But sometime during cell division, some abnormalities may occur. Instead of getting XX, a female may be born with only single X chromosome. These are the chromosomal abnormalities. And when the females with this condition, females with single X chromosomes, they are having Turner syndrome. Now, what are the symptoms they have? They are short, fail to develop sexually at puberty. Although usually having normal intelligence, they show specific cognitive deficits. Their performance is poor in arithmetic, visual form perception, and spatial organization. So these are females with single X chromosome. Always a female is having XX chromosome, but sometime during cell division, the female may be born with single X chromosome, and that abnormality is called Turner syndrome. Turner syndrome, and here the symptoms are: these females are short, fail to develop sexually at puberty, and they may be having normal intelligence, but in certain specific areas they show cognitive deficits. In certain areas, maybe somebody they are having normal intelligence, but maybe in languages they may be having some problems, or their creativity they may be having some problems. So some particular cognitive deficits they may develop. Their performance is poor in arithmetic, visual form perception, and spatial organization. So this is Turner syndrome when the female is having only one X chromosome. Then again another thing, 23rd chromosomes fail to divide properly. The developing organism ends up with an extra X or Y chromosome. Sometimes they fail to divide properly. Sometimes it may be XXY or XYY. Earlier was single X chromosome. Now this is another abnormality. It may be XXY or XYY. When it is XXY, he is physically a male. He is physically a male but marked feminine characteristics. This is Klinefelter syndrome. When the person is having XXY chromosome, that problem is called, that abnormality is called Klinefelter syndrome. He is physically a male but marked feminine characteristics. Then again XYY, it may be XYY, and the person with these characteristics, they are taller than average, unusually aggressive, they are very aggressive unusually, they are taller than average. The extra Y chromosomes apparently causes the adrenal glands to secrete an abnormally large amount of male hormone, so that they reach sexual maturity early. They reach sexual maturity early and they are super male. They are called super male. This abnormality is, their characteristic is super male, because the extra Y chromosomes apparently causes the adrenal glands to secrete abnormally large amount of male hormones, so that they reach sexual maturity earlier, and they are called super male when it is XYY. Clear? These are chromosomal abnormalities. And again an extra chromosomes on pair 21. This already we have discussed about pair 23. Now an extra chromosome on pair 21 results in a form of mental deficiency called Mongolism with upward slant of the eyelid. Down syndrome. It is also called trisomy 21, and also it is called Down syndrome. It's repetition. So here extra chromosome in 21 in 21st pair extra chromosome. That is why it is called trisomy 21. Instead of 2, there are 3. Trisomy 21. And this is Down syndrome. It is some sort of mental retardation. And these mental retarded children or individual, you will see that upward slanting of the eyelid. Kisuman Russell dekhisa neki ba, the fact that proportion is not proper. Here the distance between this, it is normal, isn't it? And they are having some, that proportion is not proper, and then upward slanting of the eyelid. It goes like this. And now if you notice, you will find this is Down's, it is called Down syndrome, and then trisomy 21. It is a mental deficiency. It is in 21st chromosome. Then another disorder, phenylketonuria. This is something different from the other one. Another disorder, phenylketonuria, PKU it is called. It is sometimes caused by the presence of a recessive gene. It is the presence of a recessive gene that prevents the individual from processing the amino acid phenylalanine. So here the recessive gene is present which prevents the processing of the amino acid phenylalanine. Unless the disorder is detected shortly after birth and a newborn is put on a diet containing low level of phenylalanine, PKU can cause irreparable mental retardation. Here phenylketonuria, it is the presence of a recessive gene which prevents the processing of the amino acid phenylalanine. So it has to be detected right at birth, then he has to be on diet rich on the low level of phenylalanine. Otherwise, if it is remains undetected, then there will be irreparable mental retardation, phenylketonuria. It is an inherited disorder that increases the level of a substance called, I have already explained, called phenylalanine in the blood. Phenylalanine is a building block of proteins. It is found in all proteins and in some artificial sweeteners. If PKU is not treated, phenylalanine can build up to harmful level in the body, causing intellectual disability and other serious health problems. The signs and symptoms of PKU vary from mild to severe. The most severe form of this disorder is known as classic PKU. Infants with classic PKU appear normal until they are a few months old. So it cannot be detected until they are a few months old. Without treatment, these children develop permanent intellectual disability. Then one is Huntington's disease. Have you heard these terms? Huntington's disease. HD is an autosomal dominant disorder. This means that the individual with one detected parent has a 50% chance of inheriting the gene. One detected parent, 50% chance of inheriting the gene. Symptoms include uncontrollable choreiform or dance-like movement. It's very clumsy. Impairment in memory and reasoning ability and alteration in personality. The average age of onset of symptom is about 40 years. The symptoms become increasingly disabling with time, and patients die 15 to 20 years after the first sign appear. Children constitute approximately 10% of Huntington's disease cases. They are more severely affected than adults and suffer more rigidity in movement. Hemophilia is a bleeding disorder that slows the blood clotting process. The clotting process is slows down. People with this condition experience prolonged bleeding or oozing following an injury, surgery, or having a tooth pulled. So profuse bleeding. In severe cases of hemophilia, continuous bleeding occurs after minor trauma or even in the absence of injury. Serious complications can result from bleeding into the joints, muscles, brain, or other internal organs. Milder form of hemophilia do not necessarily involve spontaneous bleeding, and the condition may not become apparent until abnormal bleeding occurs following surgery. This is also some genetical disease, hemophilia. Two major forms of hemophilia occurs much more commonly in males than in females. Hemophilia A is the most common type of the condition. 1 in 4,000 to 1 in 5,000 males worldwide are born with this disorder. Hemophilia B occurs in approximately 1 in 20,000 newborn males. So, these are all genetically carried disorders. These are some examples. There are a lot of examples, but just how to have an idea, I am giving you this.